Spring 1, 2022, UMass Global Practicum. This is Kristen Kleinschmidt, and I'm going to look at the same questions as the last couple terms, but from a different perspective. For this beginning video, I'd like to look at the same questions about competency from the perspective of a client. Now, I'm not going to use a client to start with. I'm going to use my own personal experience, apply it to the questions, and look at it from a third perspective at the end of the term. So for the beginning, I would like to look at what it would be like to be a client and what kind of services do they receive. What are some of the issues the client might face or feel? During winter break, I went to Minnesota through North Dakota. So I flew into North Dakota and drove up to Minnesota. On my return trip, the night before, we were told that the freeways are going to be closed, many flights are going to be canceled, but not all flights would be canceled. So I endured going through a whiteout where the freeway was closed, having to use back streets to do a 2-hour drive in almost 5 hours. But was it successful? I made it to the airport. I then had to wait 4 hours for our flight to quote unquote be delayed to learn that the flight was now canceled. While waiting for that information of you now have a canceled flight, this is where your luggage is going to be, a hotel was secured, and I was told that they had pickup to and from the airport. Later learned that the pickup to and from the airport had also been stopped due to bad weather, and they didn't have any drivers. Now let's look at the competencies and line it up with my situation. Number one, did I make an ethical decision? Was it ethical for me to go? It was okay for me to go, but what about the persons giving services? Was it ethical for them to say, we're going to have flights go out when they knew the freeways were already closed and other airlines had already canceled all their flights for the day? Did they put the passengers in harm? How could I then, in this parallel idea, be putting somebody in harm? Going through the pandemic, we have people that are sick or have family members that are at risk with cancer, and I need to be sensitive to, is it a possibility that meeting with that client could be causing them harm? So making that ethical choice, managing professional boundaries, and demonstrating professional use of self is listening to the needs of the client to make sure that they remain safe, but yet they still get their needs met. I still got a flight home at a later date, but I would put in risk when I decided to go on the road. So before I meet with that client, before they get on the road, it is important for me to make sure that it is okay for them to meet. We can always meet via Zoom. We can always meet on the phone. There are other resources that we can meet and do to keep the client where they feel comfortable, they don't feel at risk, and they're not harmed. The second point or level of competency is engaging in diversity and difference in practice. So it says to research and apply diverse client population, cultural, spiritual, and ethic values, demonstrate advanced insight into personal biases and values. In my trip, I have to go through screening. I have to go through different screens, whether it's standing up with the x-ray machine or talking to a TSA agent. They have to screen me by not looking at the fact that I'm white or female or older, but they have to think about, am I somebody that could be of potential harm? In the same way, I have to do my screenings and not look at the race of the person, their religion. I have to look at them as who they are in needs, and can I give them decent services when they are in need. So the TSA agent wants to make sure that they can get me through in a timely manner. I want to make sure that our clients meet our rules that we have established to be a good client, a good fit for our program. So for an example, for our program, they need to be on Social Security income. They cannot have a criminal background. So I'm then looking and monitoring my clients for those parameters, not based on their age, their sex, their race, or ethnicity. Competency number 3 is advanced human rights on social, economic, and environmental justice, demonstrating respect for all clients, advocate for clients who are unable to advocate for themselves. And after this flight was canceled, I was told that the airline was not responsible to cover for hotel costs, food, or any other supplies, and that the next flight out wouldn't be for a week. I had to advocate for all my own needs. And in doing so, I had to also endure a lot of costs between hotels, car rentals, etc. I have to then consider, what are the costs of my client? Do they have to pay for gas to meet with me? Do they have to pay for any other items for us to be able to help that client get to where they need to be? How can I make sure that that client's needs are met without creating a hardship on them? And if there is a need that the client needs, like let's say the client needs clothing for work, or they need to obtain a license, such as a food handler's card, does the client have resources to be able to cover those things? Or am I just like the airline saying, go get yourself a hotel for a week? Am I being that person? Or am I saying, here are some resources for you. We will help cover the cost of your clothing, of the food handler's card, of your gas, and be accommodating to the client. They still have to do their responsibilities of getting the job. They still need to go to the job interview. But how can I make it a better playing field so that client has the ability to go to the job and get the resources that they need, even if it's mental health, or maybe they need help with childcare. So those are things to be sensitive about and not just tell the client to go deal with it. Number 4, engage in practice-informed research. So it's all about research and research practices. I had to do a lot of research on the fly in the airport of a place to stay, when to get a car rental. The roads were closed. There were no cars available. There's a lot of research I had to do. So for the client, am I asking them to do all the research, or am I helping them with the research? In our job, we don't just give somebody a job. We don't just contact an employer and say it's all set up. However, if I have a deaf client and they're trying to get a job, I can contact with the written approval from the client. You have a client who would like to get a job working for you that's hearing impaired, and set up an interview, set up an interpreter, and I also provide my own training for the employer at no cost to the employer, so they can learn how to have a deaf employee work for them. This way, the deaf person, client, isn't trying to pay for and do all the research on their own. They have resources through me to be able to help them more smoothly get to that place of employment. Competency number 6, engage with individuals, families, groups, and organizations and community partners. While trying to secure a ride with Uber and Lyft, one of the other passengers on the plane came to me and said, "You're not able to get a ride, are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And I shared with them what the Lyft messages I was getting on my phone, to learn that the person who asked me how I was doing was a Lyft driver. And they knew those messages meant there were no lifts for me to get. And he and his friend said, "Jump in our car, we'll give you a ride to the hotel." Well, that sounds wonderful, a little scary, but I did it and I got to the hotel safely. Now, this is the interesting part. To engage individuals, families, and groups. Sometimes we have to engage the whole family, although the client is the one we are working with. In order to be able to work with that client, in some culture groups, we might have the parents, a spouse, children, and engage in all of them to help them help the client get to the point that we want them to get to. So we need to work as a complete unit. So the other passengers on the plane worked as a complete unit to make sure my needs were met. And in the same regard, I need to work with the whole family or unit of the client to ensure the client's needs are met. Competency number 8, intervene with individuals, families, groups, and organizations. This is more of an interpersonal where you're not just saying, okay, I'm going to bring in the whole family. Now, you're going to group together and with community groups and other organizations. So when we got to the hotel, the young man jumped out of the car, grabbed up my bags, and helped me into the physical hotel, into the lobby. I was rather surprised. We, in the same way, have to evaluate and apply evidence-based practice interventions. What is going to work? The basic line with these clients to implement the treatments to get them from the car door into the hotel. I might have to help them get from, I want a job at a restaurant, to work with them on their food handler's card so they are able to obtain the food handler's card to go forward with getting a job working at a restaurant. Sometimes it's that engaging on a personal level and not missing any of the steps, kind of like the dot every I and cross every T. Lastly, competency to evaluate practice and to evaluate your work. When I evaluated over the situation, it was very frustrating that the airline didn't cancel the night before like other airlines, allowing people to get on earlier flights and not have to wait a week. That was a lack of communication I felt on the airlines department. During the week, a lot of flights had been canceled due to COVID. So it was very difficult to be able to get out. The same way, I need to evaluate my work on a more personal level. And so, did I provide the client with everything that they need? I'm not going to spoon feed the client, but did I provide them the resources, websites, community partners? Did I listen to their needs? Did I assess their needs in the beginning fully? One of the ways I can make sure that the client is getting what they need is to double check in with Kathleen Binder, who is the supervisor on my site. Number 2, check in with the client. And often I ask this one question of the client: tell me back what you are supposed to do. So I know that the client understands their responsibilities. Then we write it out like a homework assignment sheet. These are the steps you need to do before the next time we meet. We agree to those steps. The client is also given my phone number and encouraged to call me if during any of the steps they get lost or forget or don't understand how to do it. And we can work together to make sure the client has the information that they need. In the end, the client will then feel that they have all the supports possible, and it is expected that they do their set of work too to have a positive outcome. I hope this helps correlating my experience with what it must be like to be a client getting resources. Are they on their end frustrated, or they on their end feeling positive and going forward. Thank you, and I look forward to another term.